because you have to be able to decide quickly what you're going to do. At a certain point, we can raise their strike rate.
Dr. Dan Laby, Clinical Professor, Director of Sports and Performance Vision Center, served as a sports ophthalmologist for Major League Baseball teams like Red Sox, and has trained athletes like Manny Ramirez and Trent Alexander. Do you have a pre-hit routine for batters as well?
In those early years of the Red Sox and the initial work even with the Dodgers was mostly batters.
Vision. How much of it is innate and how much of it is hard work?
To be honest with you, what you have to do in life, you have to react. There's a different level, if you will, of education to understand more about sports vision and how you can use that to perform better.
Have you noticed some key individuals where their vision results completely shocked you? Well, I want to start with the moment that changed everything. Picture this. Boston, underdogs in 2004. The crowd is going crazy. The crowd is roaring. And here we have Dr. Dan Laby quietly working behind the scenes, sharpening something that most fans didn't even know plays a role in success. Not strength, not mechanics, not the actual swing, but vision. Dr. Dan Laby's been doing this for over 30 years. In fact, you just mentioned 33 years. We've had multiple World Series rings, Premier League work, Olympic athletes, and today we're going to do a deep dive. How vision wins championships, and what no one really talks about in your gym or in your training, and how you can use these tools now. So, Dr. Laby, let's just jump in. I'll put all your intro down below. Most people who follow sports vision or follow neuroscience, they already know who you are. You've done great work at Harvard. You've worked with multiple really famous athletes and organizations. But I want to take you back to those behind the scenes work, where you're with the Boston Red Sox. Can you tell us that moment when you said, would have they been able to get to where they did if their vision wasn't dialed in?
Actually, I'm going to bring you back to the beginning of that season because that's really, the culmination is the World Series win, but it doesn't happen overnight. It actually takes a long time. It took, a call from Theo Epstein to come to work with the Red Sox in the 2003-2004 offseason. They had just lost to the Yankees, kind of a heartbreaking type of thing in 2003. They were certainly keen on doing better the next season. And he brought me in. I had a meeting, and first of all, I was blown away by what was going on in the heads of these guys. They knew statistics, they knew data, they knew players. I put up one player from my previous work with the Dodgers that we had done some vision work on, and I showed his vision functions, and I showed his performance on the field, how it went down, and then how we improved it and went up, and so forth. And I couldn't mention the name. It wasn't fair to mention the name of the player to a different team. He was still playing. But just by the statistics, he knew who that player was, and he told me exactly who the player was. And that immediately kind of blew me away that think how many players there are in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
He probably knew what club it was, so that narrows it down a little bit, but he was still able to pick out that player. It was not his club, not his league, not even his coast. It was the opposite coast. That was impressive. That was the beginning of the process. But what really made an impact, I think, for the season was a call I got from Jim Rowe, who is the head trainer for the Red Sox, that one of their best players, player Manny Ramirez, left fielder, was feeling like he couldn't see the ball. Now, we had just seen Manny about 3 or 4 weeks earlier in spring training. He saw perfectly fine. Everything checked out great. We had nothing we needed to do for him. But I got this call, and what do you mean he's not seeing the ball? He was doing great in spring training. Nothing happened in between. Well, he's not having trouble seeing the ball. He's having trouble seeing the ball. I'm like, okay, Jim, you got to give me a little better than that. It ended up being that he didn't feel it was smooth. It wasn't as comfortable how he was interacting with the pitch ball, with his bat. We thought about it a little bit and came up with this idea of let's see if we can practice what he has to do at the plate, but practice it without swinging the bat, because there's a certain number of swings a batter can have, a day. You can't just swing forever. You're going to get fatigued if you're trying. And we wanted to do something that was going to work on his vision, on his brain, on his hand-eye coordination, kind of getting things fluid for him before he went out to take batting practice and actually play in the game. And we developed these rings. You may have seen, I talked about this on the TED Talk at Fenway Park a few years ago. These rings that when I went to the clubhouse and I threw the rings to, it was Johnny Damon, I think. I threw to Johnny Damon. He had trouble catching the rings. I threw it to Johnny Pesky, who was an older gentleman already. If you've heard of Pesky's pole, the left field pole, the right field pole in Fenway Park, named after him. He had trouble doing it. Okay, maybe he was older. That's why. Manny came over and I threw the first ring to him and he snapped it right away. And was like, this is worthless, too easy. Well, fortunately, I had brought 2 other rings as backups that were progressively more difficult. And the second ring, the same thing, it was too easy. But the third ring, which was a ring that we had, think about a hula hoop, a smaller hula hoop that has 4 baseballs on it. And those baseballs were painted with red in the pattern that the baseball makes when it's thrown by the pitcher, depending on what pitch, the seams spin. And that spinning, rapid spinning, creates an image, whether it's a red dot or 2 stripes in different directions. And that signifies to the batter what pitch it is. Obviously, if the batter knows what pitch is coming, and a curveball goes one direction, a slider goes a different direction, fastball goes straight, he can then predict more accurately where the ball is going to be as it crosses the plate and put the bat on the ball. I threw that ring to Manny. I said, Manny, you have to catch, as the ring is going, curveball. And he had to identify which of those 4 spinning balls on the ring coming towards him was a curveball. Then he had to make a motor action to grab that ball as it approached him. And if you think about it, that's similar to what you have to do when you're hitting a baseball. You have to identify the pitch. You have to bring the bat to the ball at the right time. And that was difficult for him. He was challenged. And we did that several more times. He liked that. He did that throughout the entire season of 2004. And I think that played a role in bringing him to be the MVP of the World Series in that 2004 win after decades of not having won it. So I think that process, not to mention the guys we have contact lenses to and we did other training with over the season, came to that culmination when they won the World Series in 2004, which obviously for me, that was the first World Series ring, the first of 8 World Series rings that I've received. And maybe the first time is always the best time. I'm not sure. Each one of them is special, but that was certainly a very significant moment.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Are you a Red Sox fan? Did you grow up in that area?
No, I was born in Manhattan, in New York City. I grew up on Long Island, New York. I think we went to Yankee games. I remember I was at the last game at Yankee Stadium, the original Yankee Stadium. That was a fun game because once the game was over, they allowed people to take whatever they could grab. And there were people that ran onto the field and tried to dig out the bases, not knowing that there were long chains and weights underground and the mound. I got some dirt from the field. Baseball stadiums have very specific clay dirt for the field. And we got part of a chair from the original Yankee Stadium that I still have. This is the original one. Now we're into the third version right now of Yankee Stadium, but this is the original first one that Babe Ruth actually was at. So, I was at the Mets. I was in New York for the 1969 Mets when they won the World Series, the amazing Mets, miracle Mets. So I grew up in New York, but my dad is from Massachusetts. When we came back to live, we moved around quite a bit after my training. We moved to Boston. We were there for about 15 years. 2004 was 5 years into my time there. And so, when you live where you live is where you're the fan of. So, certainly the Red Sox were interesting to me. They have an incredible history. I remember as a child with my grandfather in Massachusetts listening to, Red Sox games with Tony Conigliaro and Billy Conigliaro and Carl Yastrzemski, and who was, by the way, from Long Island. All these players, the history is there. The interest is there. I played Little League. I'm not very athletic. The only way I could actually be involved with sports was this route, not through my athletic prowess. So I was a fan of baseball, let's say.
Yeah. Well, it definitely shows. I feel like where you came from being, a surgeon and a pediatric ophthalmologist transitioning into sports vision, you have to be interested in sports to go in that route. Right. I mean, that's actually where I started too. I have strabismus myself. I did a lot of pediatrics and love sports, but because of my strabismus, I was never particularly good at them until I started training my own strabismus and getting depth perception and whatnot. But sports is just so interesting. There's so much passion involved from the athlete to the coach to the player to the parent. It really unifies people. If we go back to the Red Sox, you worked with Manny, but there were many other players. Were you working with the whole team, or were you focused just on a key few individuals?
Yeah, most of the vision, although now it's somewhat changing. Most of the visual importance, we'll say, intervention is in batting. The people talk about one of the most difficult things in all of sports is hitting a baseball, and people, and we want to focus on that more difficult area. So we really started working with batters almost fully. We started out really working predominantly with batters because, as people talk about, the hardest thing to do in baseball is to hit a ball, in sports to hit a pitch ball. So we started with batters. So in those early years of the Red Sox and the initial work even with Dodgers was mostly batters. Truthfully, though, we did see pitchers here and there. There is a certain level of vision required for pitching. And in the last couple of years, I've done a fair amount of work using some techniques we get into if you want, about how to improve pitchers in addition to batters. It's a different approach. It's different requirements. But we've seen that we've been able to increase, for example, the strike rate of pitchers, ability to throw strikes or properly target where they want the ball to go by doing some vision-based interventions. So mostly batters, but the pitchers are hot on the tail.
Well, let's get into that because that sounds something very interesting. What are the visual demands of a pitcher versus a batter, and how do you train both?
Yep. So batters really are the wider need. Batters have to have very sharp vision. I talk about in my book, I Am the Champion. I talk about this vision pyramid, sports vision pyramid, and it really each level builds upon the previous levels. So the bottom level is sharpness of vision. But sharpness of vision isn't the same eye chart that you go to the eye doctor with that has the letters. That is really useless, in my opinion, to almost everything, but certainly in sports. Because sports, you don't have the luxury of sitting for a long time to think about what your answer is going to be. You don't have the luxury of seeing 100% contrast, a black target on a white background. Almost everything in sports, like the seams of the baseball, is red on tan, lower contrast. And so we created a test that actually tests vision using small targets that are faint and only shown for a short time to simulate what you have to do in sports, like hitting a baseball. And to be honest with you, what you have to do in life. If you're driving a car, you don't have the luxury of sitting there at a car coming towards you and, well, is it going to come or not? Is it big? Is it small? You have to react if you want to save yourself. And that's what we're talking about in this vision test. But the basis is vision. Then we look at how both eyes work together because that gives us 3D depth perception. Now, some sports that's more important than others. In fact, I wrote a paper years ago about the U.S. Olympic team at the Beijing Olympics where we looked at many different types of sports that were components of the U.S. team. And we wrote about the different visual functions of each. And it's really interesting that some sports require a very good sharpness, but not very good depth perception. So if you look at those two, for example, an archery, they need very sharp vision because the archery target is far away, but it's a flat target. There's no depth. Your goal is to hit the target, the bullseye in the middle, but there's no depth involved. So you don't need depth perception. And if you compare that to, for example, a boxer who doesn't need, or a fencer who doesn't need such great vision because the target's fairly large and right in front of them, but depth becomes critical. Because you need to know where that right hook is coming and you need to know how far away you are from it and so forth. And so if you look at those different sports, you see that, true, those who have good vision tend to have good depth perception because they go together to some extent. But the ratios, if you will, aren't quite the same. People that were at the bottom of the vision part are now nearer the top. Sports are nearer the top in the depth perception part. And that's important for some sports. So in baseball, depth perception isn't so critical because, number one, it takes time for depth to occur in your brain. Number two, depth occurs mainly at close ranges, not at 60 feet away. And that's the reason why all the stars look like they're the same distance from us, because they're so far away that for our eyes, it's as if we only have one eye. That different view that each eye gives us of the target when you're looking at a star is exactly the same, because the target's distance compared to this distance is so much greater that the picture is the same. as opposed to something up close where this eye has a very different view than this eye of something up close, and that creates the depth. And so baseball 60 feet, too far away, too fast a time, depth perception, not really relevant. So you do have a chance, if your depth perception isn't perfect, to play good baseball, because depth perception is not critical. And there's you can go down a whole rabbit hole about Babe Ruth, and did he have one eye or both eyes? Did he have a problem with one eye? Did he have good depth perception? Data, you can take the data either way. It's a fun little experience that's totally worthless, but that's a lot of what I do is probably worthless, but it's interesting. Yeah. So that's the second level. Then you look at, decision making, because you have to be able to decide quickly what you're going to do. And then you have to be able to make a motor action based on that decision, guided by your vision, to hit the ball. And so in batting, that whole scenario plays out. In pitching, though, you're in control of the time, basically. There's a pitch clock now, but you're in control of the timing. You don't have to do anything except put the ball in the air towards the batter. So it's not like you have to anticipate where the ball is going to be at all. You don't react to anything. You're the proactive person here. But we found in a technique that's called the quiet eye, which was initially identified by a researcher in Canada named Joan Vickers, who has since retired. But she did the initial pioneering work. Many others have done work in this area. We've done some work in the area, that where you're looking during the critical point of the sports action will determine how successful you are. For example, I published a paper in my work with an NBA team in players making free throws. And if you look at a heat map of where they're looking when they're making their free throw, the guys who got 30 out of 30 free throws, 100% success, were all looking at a very specific point on the rim every time they did their shot. You look at the guys who are getting 16, 18 out of 30 free throws, their points of looking are all over the backboard, on the rim, and so forth. They're not concentrated on a spot. And that's true in golf. It's true in hockey. I have a call in an hour or two with an NHL team. We're going to talk about this topic. This idea of the quiet eye becomes very relevant to pitchers, because during their windup and delivery, where they're looking in terms of their target and whether they can see it becomes very important. And we found when we're evaluating this in pitchers, some pitchers actually close their eyes when they're pitching. That doesn't sound like a great idea. And in fact, it's not a great idea. Sorry about that. We found players that in their windup, their glove hand comes up and blocks their view of the plate. Also not a great idea. And when we train pitchers to be more cognizant of this need to keep their fixation on a certain point, we can raise their strike rate. Their ability to throw strikes. And ultimately, that's what you want a pitcher to be able to do, is to put a pitch in a certain spot, whether it's a strike or even a ball, if that's what's required to get a batter out. But the more control the pitcher has in putting the ball where they want it to be, the better they're going to be. And we found that by training that, we can improve that. So now our work is involving pitchers as well, in a different direction than what we're doing with the batter.
Quick segment break, but you're going to want to hear this. If you're an athlete, coach, or parent, and you want faster reaction, this is where we start. This is called vector ball. This ball unpredictably bounces and it changes colors, red, green, or blue. We use this to sharpen the reaction time, focus, and coordination. And here's what makes it different. Whenever you see a different color, you can assign it to left, right, pass, shoot, adding a cognitive load, meaning that frontal lobe, while you're moving around, is making faster decisions. We use this with athletes every week, and we hardwire this decision making. Train your brain, train your eyes, dominate your game. Grab the vector ball in the link in the bio or scan this QR code to get started. Let's get back to it.
When you're working with the pitchers and their quiet eye or picking a focus point, what focus point generally do you recommend? Like a imaginary focus point or a specific point on, let's say, the catcher's glove or the knee of the catcher, depending on where they're what type of pitch they're trying to throw? How do you usually coach them?
Well, I don't so much identify where they should be looking. I'm going to leave that to the team to do. A lot of the time it's the chest. It's the logo on the chest, the letters on the chest.
Okay.
It's often not the glove, because the glove is something that the batter kind of fixes with. And lots of times the catcher will put the glove in one place That's not where the ball is going to come in order to mislead the batter. But different points on the catcher's body can be the target, and often are the targets. But where they want the pitcher to look is up to the club. My job is to make sure the pitcher does that, and that's what we train.
So how would you, let's say we have a pitcher, he's aiming for the center chest of the catcher. How would you train them to have a quieter eye? What mental technique, or how would you verbalize the pitcher do this?
So the first thing is to make sure there's no interference, no closing your eyes, no hand blocking the view at the critical point. We need to make sure you can see the target. If you can't see the target, we're already behind the ball. After that, it's a matter either of verbal cues, and we have a series of words that we have the pitcher repeat, similar to, for example, if you your viewers can find probably a segment on the internet from public broadcasting, PBS, with Alan Alda. He used to have a show, Alan Alda of MASH, for those of the older group in your audience. At this point, he had a program about science, and one of those episodes actually was with Joan Vickers in Calgary, Canada, and it shows a sequence of words that she was teaching a basketball player to use when making free throws. And basically, the idea is to have a routine that you do, which follows your eye movements, or I should say your eye movements follow the routine of what you're looking at. Nothing but net, for example, as you make a free throw. We use similar cues like that for the pitcher verbally on the mound. Ideally they're saying them, but minimally they're thinking them. Prior to that, we have some drills that we use in the clubhouse in terms of training that involve having to, do simple things like toss a ball to a target, but have to do that from further distances, not from just 2 or 3 feet, but from 20 feet, where there's an X on the target where they have to toss the ball towards that X. Perhaps as they're saying these cueing words, or just getting used to the idea of trying to always look at that. And I have glasses that will show me what the player is looking at. And I use these glasses in education with them after the words to review what they were looking at, and then we repeat it. And basically they understand that they're going to be held accountable to doing exactly what they're supposed to do, and they're going to see it themselves, whether they did it or not, until they can get to the point where they're able to actually control that eye movement as they make the task. We see that 100% on the video, and then we move into the mound to repeat the same process in pitching.
So you're getting that feel versus a reel, and you're making sure that they are in synergy.
And then reviewing it and getting feedback. Yes, feedback is critical.
Because a lot of times a pitcher will say, well, no, I was doing that. That's where my eyes were. And many times that's not.
and they're not trying to deceive you. They're very well-meaning, trying to tell you what they're doing. But unfortunately, as many of us know, if 3 or 4 people see the same event, each one will have a different recollection of what happened during that event. And probably somewhere in the middle, or the average of the 4, is what really happened. Because we process things and we have experience from the past, and that affects what we think and what we see. But video doesn't lie, and video tells us exactly what there was. And if they can get that ability to review what they did and then make a change and review again, we get that feedback loop, which then gets us to the point we want to be.
Do you have like this is almost like when you see professional basketball players do their free throw routine. This is like a pre-shot routine. Do you have a pre-hit routine for batters as well?
Well, we do similar work with the batters with these glasses because there is a specific viewing pattern where the batter can get the most information about the pitch. It takes for a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, people say it takes about 400 milliseconds. It takes about 400 milliseconds for a 95-mile-an-hour pitch to make it from the pitcher's hand to home plate. Now, that's not a very long time. A human blink is about 300 milliseconds.
Wow.
Now, if we take into account the amount of time it takes actually to physically swing the bat, about 150 milliseconds. That leaves 250 milliseconds, quarter of a second, faster than the human blink, where you have to identify the pitch, decide if you're going to swing or not, decide where it's going to go, and begin your swing. Otherwise, it's too late.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a lot of time, right? And so as a batter, we want to try to get as much information about the pitch before the clock starts as we can. And we can do that. And the view, where you look on the pitcher's windup can give you some of that information before the clock starts. For example, batters tend to look at the hand in the glove as a pitcher is in a set position getting ready to pitch, because the way they hold the ball is going to be a cue to what pitch it is, right? Now, that's called tipping. Most pitchers will try not to do that. They'll try to hold the glove in a certain way that you can't see that. But obviously, it makes sense for the batter to try to pick up what they can from that point. And they'll watch the hand as the hand comes behind the pitcher. When it goes behind the back, now there's no more information you can get. At that moment, the batter will move their fixation up to the point of anticipated release, where they think the pitcher's hand is going to be when he releases the ball. And there's reasons for that too. Now, as the hand comes from behind the back towards that window of release, the ball is being gripped by the pitcher. Depending on the way the wrist is and the hand is, that will tell what pitch it is as well. Then the ball comes through the window and starts to spin. The clock has started now, but that spin also, as you talked about with Manny, will give some cues as to what pitch it is. In the brain, subconsciously of this batter, in a very short time, and I've talked about this on my podcast, the batter has to decide, are you going to swing or not? Because you don't have much time to make that decision and start your swing. But if you get information beforehand by looking at the right places at the right time, you can get information that will be valuable. So there is a routine for the batter, and we've evaluated that that sequence, if you will, in batters. In fact, just last week, I was with a club out west, and we were doing some work with batters there. And people use batting practice. Either the coach throws the pitch, or they have a batting machine, that pitches the ball, or there's a fancy thing called Traject, which is a big screen where they have pitchers, and that video of the pitcher moves and the ball comes out of a hole, to you. Well, when you wear those glasses and you look to see what the batter's looking at, the only thing they look at is the hole. They don't look at anything else, just the hole. The eyes stay right in that hole because they know that's where the ball is coming from.
Yeah.
Well, number one, that's not the natural movements that you do when you're batting with a live pitcher. Mm-hmm. Number two, the idea of changing pitchers so the pitchers can get, batters can get used to different windups is worthless because they're not looking at the video. They're looking at the hole the whole time. That's what we've seen repeatedly. And so we need something better than that. And I have some ideas about that I'm working on. But certainly the eye movements in batting are critical. Eye movements in pitching are different, but critical as well.
Yeah, because the eye movements are different for each one, you train them differently, right?
Absolutely.
So if we go now to a different sport, you've trained athletes in many different sports at this point. You've done a lot of work with Premier League. Have you, when you tested these football or soccer in America players, have you noticed some key individuals where their vision results completely shocked you and you were surprised?
Without a doubt. My work with Trent Alexander-Arnold, portrayed in the Red Bull film, a really interesting documentary if you're interested in what we're doing, called Trent's Visions, free online. I don't get a royalty or anything, but it's a good documentary about the whole process of evaluating athletes. A lot of it, is similar in many sports. Some of it's specific to football. But Trent was kind of one example mm-hmm. of someone who had incredible skills, excellent vision, some weakness in the vision that we could improve, and we did improve. Getting him into the England team for the World Cup a couple years back. Got injured, so he didn't really play much, but at least he made the team. From one end, to another interesting person who I never actually evaluated. I'd love to take a look at, but other people evaluated, and I think Sky Sports in the UK had a series about him, Ronaldo, and what was fascinating there was his ability to actually put a ball in the goal in complete darkness. What they did was they had this studio, and first they just kick him the ball, and obviously he can put the ball into the goal easily. Then what they do is they turn the lights off after the ball was kicked. So, he saw the kick, and then the ball was coming towards him. They turned the lights off. He was still able to put the ball in the goal. And that, frankly, wasn't that impressive, because I know that the way these athletes work is using anticipation. That's the whole prediction. That's the whole key to vision in sports, is the ability to predict accurately what's going to happen in the future. If you can do that, you know where to be. You know what to do at the right time.
And you did a lot of that with Trent Alexander, right?
A lot with Trent.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, because that's the bottom line. The bottom line function in all of sports is true every sport. It's true in life, is your ability to know what's going to happen in the future. Now we're not able to tell really what's going to happen, but we can do that based on what we see in the present to some extent. And if you can do that well, if you're crossing the street, obviously you want to see the cars coming, anticipate the speed of the car, the distance you are from the car, to know whether or not it's safe to cross the street or not. But more importantly, in sports, you have to do that, because sports, in almost every sport, involves interacting with something, whether it's an e-sport, whether it's football, whether it's baseball, basketball, hockey, ping pong, badminton. One can even argue in chess that there is a need to predict and anticipate what's going to happen in the future several moves ahead if you want to be successful. So
totally.
Even when there's no ball coming towards you, and I'm not very good at that part of chess, and so I don't play chess on the street very much. But that ability to predict is critical. And so what they did with Ronaldo is, and what was interesting, is they turned the lights off before the ball moved. In other words, the person's foot was coming towards the ball, lights went out. The person kicked the ball, Ronaldo still put it in the goal. Now, I will tell you that the first ones where the lights were on, he could do a header, he could put it with his foot, he could be much more precise on the movement. When the lights were out completely, he had to use his body to move the ball, to interact with the ball. Now, obviously, that means that his error in prediction was larger. He knew that, so he needed to have a larger target to interact with the ball than just his head. But he still put it in. And if you think about it, that's crazy. And How does he do it? Well, he sees the foot. He has enough experience and background in his mind to know the way the foot is moving towards the ball, and the hips and the leg is going to tell him where the ball is going to go. And that's all he needed. And with that, he didn't have to see the ball move. That's not important. It's what's going to make the ball move is what's important. Yeah. And he's able to predict. And so, in football and in many sports, giant slalom, I spoke some to the U.S. Giant slalom team. Incredible amount of prediction required to move properly through those gates. And to time things correctly, because we're looking at time here. So you can move through the gate slowly, but that's not going to get you a gold medal. You have to do it quickly and efficiently and correctly. All prediction. That's the bottom line. The bottom line in all of this is prediction / anticipation.
Now, I know a lot of football players that have that belief that just by playing more, that they will have better prediction. And that's true to a certain extent. But when does that plateau where you reach a point where you need more, where you can't get better to a certain point? And why does that happen to some people and not others? Or does that happen to everyone?
Yeah, I'd say that there's a couple things. First of all, quality of the experience is critical. Malcolm Gladwell in his books, other people talk about this 10,000 hour rule. People talk about it's true, not true. The idea of experience is really the bottom line there, the common denominator. But the experience has to have quality. And for example, if you're a baseball batter and your vision isn't good enough to see well, you can sit there for 30,000 hours, and you're not going to get a whole lot of quality experience that's going to allow you to predict what the ball is, because you never saw the seams, you never saw the fingers of the pitcher on the ball. You're not getting the right experience. And so, again, with that vision pyramid, you want to have that optimized so that the experience the player has is quality and can add to that arsenal. Once you have good experience, then you're going to be able to build up the ability to predict. Now, when we train athletes, we and training it in strength and in anything, we see improvement, then we see plateau, and then we have to keep pushing and we get more improvement. And it's a step-by-step process. It's not a straight linear line. And that's true in vision work as well. And so I haven't seen anybody get to a point where they can't improve any of their visual functions. Now, I will say that there is a limit to human vision sharpness, for example. Mm-hmm. And by the way, for your listeners, it's not 2020. 2020 is not perfect vision. If someone tells you you're great, you're 2020, in my view, you're average. Not even an average athlete, you're average street, which is most of the time fine. You know, in New York, 20/40 or better vision is what's required to drive. You know, that's frankly a little scary. And it's testing with an eye chart, which is worthless. So it's had nothing to do with how fast you see it. So if you take 3 minutes to correctly read the 20/40 line, you get a license. But the person who can read the 20/40 line in half a second and go all the way down to the 20/10 line and get most of that correct in 5 seconds is seeing far better than you do. And I'd much rather have him as a driver or her as the driver in my car than the other person. But that's the rule.
Good thing you guys have a subway.
Sorry?
Good thing you guys have a subway there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have to cross the street to get to the subway. And I will personally testify that crossing the streets in New York City, in Manhattan where I live, is a dangerous endeavor. Oh, it's even the corner in front of where I live, many, I'm not sure exactly how many, but several people have been struck there. It's really, you have to be careful. But that's not only true in New York City, it's true everywhere. But you want to go to your eye doctor and tell them, I want to see as good as I can physically see, right. Not just as good as you want me to see 2020. If I can see 2015 or 2010, I want that because that will make my experience in life that much better. I will see things more clearly and more quickly, and therefore be able to train myself, if I'm an athlete, more efficiently. And so you need to have vision maximized, your experience maximized, to move past that point where you're not really improving to get to the next level. And there will be limits. I am not going to be a professional athlete. You can train the heck out of me. I'm not going to get there because my body and my mind is just not in that area. I have other strengths. Right. And that's the important part, to understand that everybody has unique characteristics that make them different and special and able to do things that other people can't. And people's job in life should be to find what that is for them, exploit that, and that should give them income, should give them happiness, give them satisfaction, that's what they're good at. Because everybody's good at something, I guarantee you. The problem is people don't look to find what that is.
Right. And that's so key for, all facets of life. But if we go back to, let's say, a parent or a coach who has this player who emotionally is totally bought in, but they're not sure if they've reached that quality experience or if there's something missing. How do they know if the vision part is ready to be trained, or when should the vision part be trained?
Unfortunately, many, many people don't look at that area and reach a point where they don't go further because of not having looked at that area.
So you're saying like a ceiling effect?
Ceiling effect, absolutely. Yeah. It will depend on the sport, how high that ceiling is, but almost everybody will get to a ceiling. Now, perhaps their abilities are so incredible and they're in a sport where the vision is maybe less important. Let's say a boxer, right? And clearly boxing visually is less demanding than hitting a 95-mile-an-hour baseball or returning a Rafael Nadal serve. It's a different visual skills, and you can probably get away with less optimal visual function. And so, maybe I never tested Muhammad Ali. Maybe Muhammad Ali didn't have great vision, but he had lots of other abilities that allowed him to move to the professional and to the elite level in sport. But if you're in a sport that requires that vision and you don't look at it, you're going to hit the ceiling pretty quick. And maybe it's Little League. I have glasses. I got them after my Little League experience. Perhaps I could have done better in Little League.
Yeah.
I had a pretty good arm. I started as a pitcher, ended up more in the outfield. I could throw people, from outfield to the plate pretty well, but I couldn't hit very well. Maybe it was because of my glasses, my vision, which I didn't have then. And that was the end of my Little League career, and ended up being a doctor. Perhaps if I had my vision, I would have been better. I would encourage any parent of a child of theirs who is interested, who they're paying money for travel teams. They're going to hotels. In Arizona, where I was last week, and the hotel was a travel team from somewhere. They're paying money for all this. They're taking the time to do it. Look at the vision. Get a good sports vision exam, not just your regular eye doctor who will tell you 20/20 is great, you're fine. Go to a sports vision person who will tell you, you want to play baseball, you're 20/20. Well, the average vision for a major leaguer is 20/12. We can get away with 20/15, which is one line smaller than 20/20, but 20/20 is just not going to cut it as the pitchers get stronger and older, as you move through Little League, and the pitchers throw faster and the ball now moves more. You're not going to get fastball after fastball. You're going to get movement. You're not going to see it. You're not going to hit it. You're going to strike out. And eventually it means it's going to be the end of your Little League career. Get that looked at, get that optimized, and maybe you'll make it to college. Maybe you'll make it to minor leagues. Who knows? That will then depend on your talent, not being restricted by your vision. And I wrote in the book, and my colleague who I do this work with for many years, we talk about, we want to be able to tell somebody it's not your vision. If you're struggling, it's not because of your visual abilities, it's something else. I don't know if it's bat speed, your swing, I don't know.
Right.
But it's not your vision. That's what we want to do. But we never get the opportunity if we never see the player.
Right. And that's limiting, capping that potential. Can you share a story where you had either an athlete or even a coach who didn't really believe in vision training at first and then had this breakthrough moment where things just clicked and realized how much vision plays a role?
Well, it always happens after the fact, right? After we prove them and they, oh, wow, that's pretty good.
That's the hard part. It happens after. So if someone already is skeptical, then they'll never get there.
To some extent. Well, I specifically last week included the most recent exams I did last Thursday, 4 days ago. We always, when we're correcting someone's vision, we always want them at the end of that, we determine there's a small prescription. And by the way, another paper we published talked about how athletes are much more sensitive to small prescriptions than the average person. So a lens power that's very weak, that a regular person probably wouldn't see much benefit in having. When we put that on the athlete, we got, oh my gosh, I can see so much better.
Right.
An incredible effect. And so I always show them the lens, their vision through the lens, and have them compare it to their vision without the lens. Because I want them at that moment to realize this is having an incredible impact on my ability to see small things.
Yeah.
Because then they put the dots together and say, well, if I can do that, I'm going to be able to see better in sports. And it gets the buy-in that we need. Almost always they're skeptical, and there are certain players, for example, players coming from Dominican or the Caribbean, tend not to want correction. I think maybe there may be a societal, social stigma. If you have the glasses, something's defective with you. There's a problem. As opposed to, wear these glasses, you're going to get a big contract. You're going to be the David Ortiz of your town, and everyone's going to come running to you. You're going to be, incredibly successful. And so having that understanding that then improves your vision, and then the next step to that improves your game, is something that we have to often educate the player on. So they come in skeptical, not really buying in, but then we show them the different things and how it relates to performance. And unfortunately, scientific papers that are published in really good journals don't mean much to these guys. They don't know what that is. But if I tell them, well, we did Manny here, and we did, this other guy over here, for example, Stephen Drew, what we did with him. We do these different things with these players, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and so forth. And I can only really talk about players who have been in the public domain with what we've done with them. I can't talk about players that haven't talked about it, because there are many, many more of those. But if we show them that, then they start to buy it. These are the hero guys. These are top of their sport. If I can be like them, I want to do that. And then we see buy-in.
And there's so many pro athletes that have been doing things like these, but it's definitely not able to be talked about. And that's one of my goals with this podcast is let's reach those who are really being potentially capped because of vision. And let's do what you said. Let's be able to tell them it's not your vision. Because if it is your vision and that's holding you back, then you'll never reach where you want to reach. And all that work, all that effort, all that money you're spending on coaching, all the time you're spending will not get you there because your vision is literally capping what you can achieve.
Absolutely. That's 100% true. The clubs understand this. That's why most of my contracts are actually with clubs, because they understand that this is going to help them put a team together that's going to be successful and going to win. Frankly, not all clubs understand that, but in baseball, 1992 when we started, 33 years ago, that wasn't the case. There was a lot of education, but sports are a monkey see, monkey do. When one club does it, another one wants to do it. So baseball has really grown a lot between not just the vision part of it, but the data analysis, the cognitive understanding. We talked about diet, sleep, all the different areas that can impact performance really are coming through in baseball, coming through to some extent in professional football, soccer. But I can tell you, I've had probably half a dozen calls with Premier League teams over the last couple of months because the offseason just finished for them. And the awareness of vision impacting is very low. The number of Premier League clubs that really look into this is very small. And let's broaden that, not just Premier League, but La Liga throughout Europe. These clubs just are not at the point yet of understanding the importance of vision. And I often tell them, if you're a club who buys into this and does this, you're going to have a step ahead because no one's behind you. Everyone's behind you. You'll have a chance to move forward. And often it's the clubs that are already very good that are doing that. But, it's an opportunity. And on the individual basis, I wish more individuals understood this opportunity, exploited it, raised their ceiling, let their talent go. And, I had a player in the office last week that, was not a professional, but realized that his career had reached the climax, and that was with a championship in collegiate play. And he knew he wasn't going to go on further. He was finishing his college education and going to grad school and his career. But he left with a feeling of accomplishment. His team had won. He had spent, all this time, since being young, training and playing. He played well. He enjoyed it. He met people. He won a championship in college, and that let him feel positive about everything. And it was his time to go. And that's success. He didn't play Major League Baseball. That's great. But he was fulfilled. He was successful. He won a championship. And really, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And the whole goal is to be efficient when you train, right? There's only so much time in the day. If you are not optimizing your vision, 80 to 90% of what you take in and respond to in any sport is visual, right? No one's playing blindfold. It takes me back to my days where I played blindfold chess. I played in blindfold chess tournaments. But that's one of the exceptions. Most sports, that visual information is what you use. You're not smelling a play. You're usually seeing a play. And so if that part is not optimized, then, what are you doing? We have to get that portion optimized. So I think that makes sense when we tell athletes about that because that resonates. But there's still, like you said, a lot of players, club teams that haven't really bought into improving all their players and optimizing that. And I think in the way I see the future is I think every club will have a vision specialist on staff in the future, just because more and more, it's already research proven, but more and more people are learning about it with your TED Talks, with what you're doing with your podcast, with your book, that this is information that people will start to actually not just learn, but use.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. You're right on target. Some of my time has actually shifted from, exploring different visual phenomenon. I go back to, I have several textbooks in the shelf behind me that are basic vision science textbooks. because I'm not a PhD, I'm an MD, right? So I don't have all the vision science information. I want to try to find some little piece of something that I can optimize. For example, something called rapid serial visual presentation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a technique it's done. There's lots of cognitive understanding around it. How can I exploit that to help an athlete perform better? So I spend time doing that, but I've had to take away some of that time to go to understanding of social media, internet, to try to think it's great to have the message here, but I need to get it out there. And, one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, I've done many podcasts, is to get this message out. And, for example, I just created, it's not even up yet on my website, a quiz where I'm able to kind of categorize based on about 10 answers, what your knowledge is and your motivation in sports vision is, into what's the best and most efficient way for you to improve that.
Yeah.
My hope is that someone got to that point, is interested already, so that going through this process, we can figure out what's the most efficient way. And it kind of breaks into 4 different categories. And there's a different level, if you will, of education to understand more about sports vision and how you can use that to perform better. I've never created, this a quiz funnel, it's called, before. So I'm taking away my time from, improving sports vision, which is what I really like to do, to understanding and hiring people to help me create this awareness routine, because the knowledge with me is worthless. I realize that the knowledge has to get out there, and I spend my time not doing that in addition to sports vision.
And I'm going to link that, if you don't mind sharing that quiz with me. I'm going to link that quiz for our podcast listeners. And if you don't understand, Dr. Laby is a very busy man who's sought after with many clubs, many players at pro and collegiate levels and all levels. So if he's creating a quiz, he's going to make sure it's the highest quality and being the most functional to help you with your sport. So make sure you take that time to do the quiz and see what the results are, and then follow up either with me or with him based on what you feel like you need to achieve your goals. So I'll link that down below. I'm going to do that quiz myself too, because I'm kind of curious to see how it goes. But if
I'm just going to say that at this moment, as we're speaking, it's not quite online yet. My website, you can put my website in there. It will be on the website. As you mentioned, maybe I'm a little OCD, but I've gone through the quiz many times, creating the pages after that to take people through the process depending on the results of the quiz, make sure the wording is correct, make sure it's clear. I've had lots of people look at the quiz already. I just had someone yesterday go through commenting that the background bothered them, that I had to work on the background, all these different pieces. So the website, it will be on the website.
Okay.
For sure. And then certainly quiz is available.
Yeah, I think by the time I probably edit this podcast and get it all together, it'll probably be ready. But I'll link the website down below. If the quiz is ready, I'll link the direct quiz as well. And then I'll put all your social media things as well. But I do have one question before we let you go. Vision, born or trainable? How much of it is innate and how much of it is hard work?
Well, like everything in life, both is the answer. What you think, if you think about vision, there's 2 parts, and we sometimes separate seeing from vision. So think about what the eyeball does. The eyeball takes in light, focuses the light hits the retina, which then translates that light signal into an electrical signal, right? And then it has to go through the visual parts of the optic nerve through parts of the brain into the visual part of the brain and be processed. And so there are certain things, for example, in the eye that if they're not working properly will affect your vision. In other words, you're not seeing properly, it will affect what you feel in terms of vision. If you have a cataract, if you have corneal problems, something as simple as knee glasses, that will affect your vision, and that can be correctable. Now, some of it isn't correctable. If you have a retinal disease, I had a patient who has a form of retinitis pigmentosa called Usher syndrome. I can't fix that. I can't make that better. We hit a ceiling there. So vision is limited by that process. On the other hand, if your eye is doing perfectly, but your brain isn't working on that information, in handling that information properly coming from the eye, now we might have some ability to intervene. And so we can intervene in the brain's processing. We can intervene on the eye processing. but there are going to be limits, both in the eye and in the brain. For example, if someone has a lazy eye in terms of vision because of a childhood vision problem, where they maybe had a patch when they were younger, but they weren't complying with the patch and the vision never got to perfect, we can't really bring that vision to professional level of vision at an adult age. But there are ways we can improve it. We can do different things. But there are limits. And so part of it is trainable, fixable, and part of it is innate that we can't fix. Not everybody's going to have the limit, the ability to see the limit of human vision, which is 20/8, in fact, meaning that person can see from 20 feet what the average person sees from 8 feet. Not everybody's going to get that level of vision because of those limitations, both in the brain as well as in the eye. People that are nearsighted tend to have longer eyes. The little cameras, the photoreceptors, are then further apart. If there's a very small picture that falls between two receptors, you don't see it. You got to stimulate the receptor to see it. Mm-hmm. Whereas so we don't expect people to have high amounts of nearsightedness to be maybe even 20/15 or 20/20 often. Yeah. Forget about 20/8. And so that's a limitation I can't change. That's a physical characteristic of the eye. So it's both. What your eye is, how you're born, how you grow up, limits you. Or if there's no limit, your brain might limit you, and we may be able to help in certain areas.
Would you say then that whether you have limitations or not, it can be improved to a certain point based on their genetics?
Yeah, I would say that almost everybody is not using their visual system to its limit, to its physiologic genetic limit.
And we're not talking about athlete. We're talking about everyone.
Everybody, oh yeah, everybody. In fact, I try to think about what I do as sports and performance vision. Performance being for the non-athlete, if you will, like we talked about crossing the street, predicting a car coming, driving a car, reacting to different things in life, whether you're walking or whatever you're doing. I'm not going to take, for example, a librarian who is someone who works with books close up, maybe not a librarian. Let's talk about on a computer, because lots of people are on computers. A 55-year-old or 60-year-old person on a computer who has a very small amount of nearsightedness.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't accept that with your general doctor. You shouldn't accept that with the eye doctor, no matter what you're doing in life, whether it's sports or not.
Yeah. And even for the doctors that are listening, if you have an athlete and you see that this person wants to reach the higher levels, that's the time where either you learn how to help them or you find someone who can help them, because don't let that cap them.
One of the most frustrating things is I created the form for the MLB draft, which they send out to the players to give to their eye doctor to fill out about their vision. Very specifically crafted form. I look at those forms sometimes from clubs, and I review them for the draft, and the doctor, all they filled in is a couple things. They wrote 20/20, nothing needed. They're fine. Buddy, I don't say this, but buddy, you need a different doctor. They're not servicing you to the most benefit for you. Yeah. They're doing what's easiest for them and what is the average for everybody. And that's unfortunate, but the medical system is such that that's how it encourages, throughput. Yeah. More people see, the better. Don't spend a lot of time with one person to get to the bottom of what there is, and, do your best for them. Do the minimum, get them out the door to see the next patient. That's the medical system. That's just incredibly frustrating. And I see those forms and I think about those players. Sometimes I see them before the draft, and I can then spend the time to get them where they need to be. And I'm thinking right now of a couple already that some of them are children of ex-major leaguers who didn't have it. We did that, and their careers blossomed because they have talent. They're an ex-major league kid.
Obviously, yeah.
And they're on an incredible trajectory to be, like their dad. Whereas when I saw them at the draft, they weren't going to make it. They would not have gone very far. I'm thinking about one in particular. So it's really, the patient needs to be an advocate for what they want, what they need, to make sure they get what they need, because no one's going to give it to you unless you say so.
I created a document like that for my athletes as well, and for social media. Would you mind sharing your MLB form? I can link that down below as well. I think that could be helpful not only for the pro players, but also players who are interested in at least getting a jump start. Because we know a lot of athletes who haven't even got an eye exam because they think they see fine. And step one would be, okay, let's download this form, take it to the eye doctor, And then, if there's anything wrong with the form, or even you could send it to one of us and we can analyze it, that will give you an idea where are you at. It may not be a full sports vision exam, but it will be a starting point.
So I'm not sure about ownership, copyright, or anything in terms of that form that I mentioned.
Okay.
But if you want to send me your form, I'd be happy to make sure that what I think should be on a form is there.
Absolutely, I will.
And that would serve the same purpose without copying an existing form.
Okay. Dan, this has been, or Dr. Laby, sorry, this has been totally eye-opening. Can you just leave us with one takeaway that you would want a parent, coach, or athlete to know before you sign off?
Yeah, I think we just mentioned a moment ago, to be your own or your child's best advocate. There's no question that a parent wants their child to succeed. Every parent does. I haven't met one that doesn't. If you educate yourself on how sports vision can help, and then when you go for it, make sure you have an eye exam, first of all. And when you have that eye exam, make sure you're there, making sure the doctor is the right doctor and that they're performing the testing and the intervention, and you're having a discussion that's relevant to your child's ability to progress in the sport. I can tell you as a doctor, when I have a patient come in who's educated, who's read, who knows what they're talking about, that discussion value skyrockets. When I have someone who is on their phone looking at text messages while I'm working with their child and speaking with the child, who doesn't ask me very much, there's no question that the interest level is lower. The quality of that interaction and what they gain from me, because I'm ready to share everything like we're doing here. I can only do that if I get the right questions, as you've asked, or I have the right interested party, because I can't just stand there for an hour talking if the person's not listening. I'm not going to waste my time. And so the tidbit, the most important point is educate yourself, go with your child, or go for yourself educated as the athlete, and ask the questions, challenge the provider, make sure that provider is the provider you want, and both can work together, because nothing satisfies. We went to medicine for all these years, not just to turn over patients. We spent years and years of training, not sleeping at night, getting phone calls at 3 a.m, miserable time, because it satisfies us to see people perform better and get better, whether it's an illness or in sports. When Stephen Drew hit a home run in the, I think, Game 6 of 2013, maybe 2018 World Series, I lost track already. 2018, I think. That to me, I still remember the satisfaction I had when he went from, a terrible batting average until I gave him contacts, to then go 2 for 4, almost 3 for 4, seal the win for the World Series for the Red Sox. That satisfaction, watching it on TV, was, like going to Disneyland after winning the Super Bowl.
Oh yeah.
That was the moment, and all doctors want that. So if the patient comes in, the athlete, the parent, and we can make that change on that athlete, that's why we're doing this. And that's what we want. I can't stand someone comes in and watches on their phone the whole time and doesn't pay attention to what I'm doing, because that tells me they're not interested. They don't care what I have to say. And therefore, I'm not interested either. I'm finished with you. Next patient who is interested.
That's so huge. If you guys have been listening thus far and you've liked this conversation with a literal legend in sports vision, please share this podcast, tag a friend, share some of the clips we're going to release, and help get this message out. Because vision truly, it's not just what you see. It's literally how you can win. And Dr. Laby's shown that with his athletes he is allowed to talk about, and with many athletes that, it's being gatekept and unfortunately not talked about enough. So help us out, get this message out there. And if you have any questions, you can leave a comment down below or reach out to any one of us, and I can get you in touch directly with Dr. Laby if you're interested in learning more and digging deeper into the eye of the champion.